How are you guys doing? Yep. Got a fan base here. So Buddy and I have been trying to get on stage for a long time. I'm Nancy Novak, Chief Innovation Officer at Compass Data Centers, and the famous Buddy Reiser here, who's basically the king of Data Center Alley, in my opinion. We've been trying to get together on stage, so we thought this was really special, and I hope that we can get some people to find their way over here because we are going to talk about a bunch of P's, and we just got keyed up really nicely by Mr. Wonderful. So, Buddy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, he said it at the end, right? Data centers are having their moment, but somehow we've lost the narrative. You know, there's so much good that has come out of the data center industry. It is so important to our future, not only those of us that are in the industry, but in general, America. So how do we do a better job? How do we position ourselves better?
That's my career. Hold on, I'm going to do this other one. And I'm also going to get quicker. Try this.
Is that better? Yeah, sound good. But how do we do a better job? How do we make all of the narrative that is out there, you know, a little bit more balanced? Because there's so much information, but there's so much misinformation. And it's funny because data center conferences are letting those people now talk too. And so it's an interesting time for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think perception-wise, power is just now becoming a big problem, which is exactly what Mr. Wonderful said. But there was other reasons as well for people not wanting data centers that were, somewhat, misleading. And so we want to talk about the piece. And I'm gonna click. Okay, it did work. So here we are, and we really just have one slide. So, yeah, here we are. Okay. So there's the 5 P's. Now when iMason started out with I think they had 3 P's to begin with, and we added a P and then another P. And so we were like, let's just stick with this trend. So the first one, which we were just saying, is perception. Is perception, right? And I literally have to turn this over to Buddy because he's got the best stats on what data centers really do for local communities, right? And so as we're building out, and of course Ashburn is many times the densities of most places on Earth, as we build out our data center infrastructure, we want the community to understand what the benefits are and also what the consequences are for not doing it.
Yeah, and you know, we're probably the best story, but certainly not the only story. People forget 18 years ago when I first started chasing data centers, and I did the first deal in Loudoun County with Chris Crosby, and we were in a lot of trouble as a community. We were 81% dependent on residential real estate, so when the housing bubble burst, we lost 1/3 of our tax revenue. Taxes went up to $1.28.5. We were laying people off, cutting back on services. We didn't have full-day kindergarten. You know, and today, you know, we have more of that than anywhere in the world. I mean, we have the best schools and the best roads and the best everything. And we've been able to lower our tax rate by 48 cents, saving the average homeowner $3,500 a year. Pretty awesome, right? But somewhere along the line, and it happened 4 or 5 years ago, you know, everyone was really positive about data centers and what it was doing to our community. But with the density came more challenges. With the growth became more awareness. And that was the real thing that has made a difference for us. And now trying to combat that conversation with the facts of what it has done for the community is a really important step for us.
I also want to point out that so economic development is one thing, and we talk, and Betty's the best at talking about that. And I think what the stat you gave us was like every time you get a job in a data center, it's 26 jobs in a local community, right?
I mean, you see that concentric circle, right? I mean, you know that there's going to be 3 direct jobs, and then you have the next circle, and then the next circle. It really goes right through the entire economy and really makes an impact.
Well, and one of the things I always like to point out when I speak about the benefits of data centers and the necessity for them is the digital divide and how important it is to close this gap. Because if you're at the keynote, you saw how important data is, right? How critical it is, not just to e-commerce and everything else, but just to our everyday lives. And so it's fascinating to see the pace of the growth, which is one of our P's, and then trying to understand like what happens if we slow down? What happens if we press pause? Well, you know, all the technology and the advancements we make in healthcare, in infrastructure, in our defense systems, in education, you know, they need this data to continue to advance, right? National security concerns, you know, come to mind. And as you just heard, you know, we're number one in the AI world right now. China's right behind us, and they have a quarter of the world's population. And then Saudi Arabia. So those two would be super glad at press pause, right? So my point is like, you know, look at the consequences around how we have to continue to grow and advance as a nation and as a people, and understand the importance of the consequences of not continuing the pace. And then, one more thing, because I'm a builder, I bring this up. So, and then think about the opportunity the digital infrastructure has in pivoting and bringing the construction industry into the future. The wash, rinse, repeat, the way that we can get better and better, the way that we can be more responsible in how we build, more efficient, more diverse, better quality, safer, more sustainable, right? Because we're learning and we're learning fast, and we have to continue to put work in place. So the opportunity to take an industry that's ages old, right? That also is responsible for somewhere nominally 50% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and does these kind of things for heated waves and these silos, and it's very litigious, all the crappy things about that. And the reason why people don't like to come into our industry, which I love my industry, right? Data centers can change that. It's almost incumbent upon them to do that. And I'm really excited about the opportunity for us to be able to take an industry that I think is fascinating and noble and important and bring it into the future.
I would argue that there is no industry out there that has more impact on more of the economy than the data center industry. I mean, when you take everything from the energy to the way we've evolved on that, to the construction, to the way we use everything every single day. You know, by 2027, about $8.75 trillion of the economy is going to be dependent on data centers. So we passed the point where it's if, right? It's not if data centers, it's where data centers and how data centers. And you said a very important word, infrastructure. This is as critical of infrastructure as power, as water, as everything else. Because those that don't and aren't using data, they're falling behind. Kids that can't use the internet for education, they're falling behind. And there's plenty of data out there to show that. So we have to get to a point where we are engaging in a way that people understand how critical this is.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the whole infrastructure thing. I mean, hospitals are infrastructure, roadways are infrastructure. It's like, there's not a single industry I've built for in my career, and I've built for almost every one of them, that doesn't rely on data, need data, apply data, transact data, collect data. I mean, it's none of them, right? So it is the tip of the spear for the fifth industrial revolution. And if we want to be leaders, we have to understand how to continue the pace that we're on and do it in a responsible way, and advertise the fact that this is a good thing and it's something that's necessary. It is interesting to me when I came into Compass 8 years ago, it was like, oh, we're the little known industry that nobody knows about. We have to tell people who we are, because we need to attract, workforce. And I'm like, oh, construction is like old and everybody knows us. Nobody wants to be. I said, we have opposite problems. We're well known and our reputation's not good. You're not known and you really don't have a reputation. And then overnight, all of a sudden, everybody knows what a data center is, right? It's hit in every major headlines. And the reputation goes in the tank over all of these, misinformation, right? All over, oh, it's a big, ugly buildings and just suck all this power, right? So now we're like scrambling. And I think it's so interesting how it's so exponential. Like we're just scrambling to say, like, no, wait. Not only is this necessary, and not only do we have to get, not only are we doing great things compared to many industries, but we're a good industry to belong in, right? And all the industries depend on us.
And part of that is on us as an industry. I mean, for the longest time, everyone didn't want to talk. They didn't want to be visible. They didn't want their names on things. You know, I mean, to have some of these names in your community, people should look at that and go, wow, we are a major hub for Amazon. We are a major hub for Google, Microsoft, Meta. You know, those are good things. So I think that for the longest time, we were reticent to tell our own story. And because there's always going to be a story told, if you're not telling the story, then you surrender the narrative to somebody else.
Yeah, that's so true. And so, like, how do we do that? How do we do that when you think about the influx of data coming from so many different sources? I was telling one of my colleagues the other day, it's like you have these camps of people who get information from certain sources, right? Because nowadays it's not like pre-syndicated news stations, it's everywhere. And the best way it was described to me was you have to love your neighbor and you have to have some compassion and understanding, because a lot of times they're in a different theater and they're watching a different movie than you are. They literally are. You're watching a rom-com and they're watching a horror flick. You know, and it's about the same topic, right? And so when you really put it in that perspective, you're like, oh, that's probably the way it is. And so how do we bridge the gap on that? How do we get the spontaneous awareness and the commonality around what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why it's important? You know, and think about that, because I'm genuinely asking you this question. I've been trying to figure this out, right? I'm trying to figure out how to advertise in a way that gives us spontaneous awareness. And when I say that, I mean, if I say to you bucket challenge, who knows what I mean? Raise your hand. Right? Like if I say, you know, pink ribbon, do you know what that is? You know what it stands for? Sure you do. This is spontaneous awareness, right? So how do you get that for our industry so people are attracted to it? And how do we change our industry to bring the right people into it? And I do want to talk about people, because that's one of our P's that we have to talk about.
Yeah, before we do that though, I mean, I think that marketing is great and you know, advertising is great, but so much of what we have to do, at least at my level, is listen to the people that complain and listen to, I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you, I get probably more hate mail than anybody in our county. It's just a fact. I mean, it happens every day. And
he's so lovable.
Yeah. But, you know, the accusations and everything, but I return every email. I return every call. I go to every public meeting. It's not fun. I mean, I'll tell you, it's not fun. But it's something unique, because even the most adamantly angry people, when you actually listen to them, let them get it out, and then talk to them in a compassionate way, it takes their legs out. You know, they're no longer angry. They don't like it still, but
they were heard.
But they were heard. They felt like somebody. That I'm not some nameless, faceless bureaucrat who's just focused on tax revenue, right? That I'm actually part of the community, that I'm listening, that I'm responding, and always respectful, even if they're not respectful to me.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, good leadership skills over here. It's like to take a note out of that. But I want to talk a little bit about, like, so when we're not going in order, we're kind of talking about all the P's together, right? Because there's a lot of them. And I like to frame this a little bit to help us with diving in. And that is this kind of perfect storm that's happening on the global stage. So a lot of folks in the audience are concerned about supply chain and concerned about, you know, the demands and the demand, you know, our inability to meet the demand. And when you think about it, it's not just data center demand, right? It's the demand on the industry to put work in place. And if you look at AI, one of the last things that will get replaced by AI is the skilled worker, right? So when we think of people, and we think that there's close somewhere south of 1 million jobs available right now in the trades. And the aging workforce is an average getting close to 50, and they're going to be retiring the next, you know, less than a decade, right? And, you know, for every 4 people that leave, like only 1 comes back in. And the skill level needs to be there. So it's like we're in a crisis now. In fact, there was a roundtable at the White House held about a year ago, and Brad Smith from Microsoft was there, and they said it's a national security concern. because we have to put this work in place. And I know that we talk about modern construction and ways we can do more with less, which we do have to do that. It's very, very important. It's another great opportunity to pivot an industry that's age old into the future and attract the right workforce. So it's so critical that we continue talking about this. And here's the other fascinating fact. When I started doing this, and I mean, I built a lot of stuff, right? I came here to DC to do the Pentagon before the terrorist attack and then stayed. I have built launch pads, I have built airports, I have built museums, I've done a lot of things. And data centers is one of those things. And now I look at the data center industry and I'm like, I'm so encouraged by us, learning, failing, and learning again to get better and better and better. It's kind of like, I compare it to the tech world when they were all siloed and then they went to full stack, right? Like, how do we get to where we're all in the same boat, we're all in the same direction, and becoming more efficient? And when I started coming to these conferences, I would be the only construction person represented, right? Because it was always about what the guts inside the building. It was about how do we operate the facility. We need those people. That was the mystery. And now you see the shift, right? It's like, wait a minute, we need to build these things, right? And then upgrade them and maintain them and all this stuff. And it's kind of like, like once you get that data center done, it's like shift. You start painting it, you go back in and technology has changed, and so you need a workforce that's, for all perpetuity of that long asset that you're going to have. And so this realization is like, yes, thank you for getting here and understanding this. And oh, by the way, in construction, we've seen this train wreck coming for 3 decades, right? And so here we are. And so, what is the mother of invention? Necessity, right? That's what I like to say that. So we have to figure this out. And I feel like since it's necessary, we will. So again, I'm glasses half full kind of person.
And I, just to be clear, I've never built anything other than Legos. So that's, I respect all of that. This morning, I spoke at another event that iMasons was having about reskilling and job creation in this industry. We're going through something really unusual in this area now, in the DC metro area, because everyone we have a huge percentage of federal government workers, and they're all on pins and needles because they don't know what their future looks like. So, when you have, I think it's 21,000 open jobs, technology jobs in Northern Virginia, there are these opportunities to reskill, reinvent, retrain yourself, and find something that is future-facing. And we're seeing it, in our programming. We're seeing twice as many people show up for finance classes or those kinds of things. We're experiencing a huge influx of people coming into the community college. We're seeing job applications where we used to get 50 per applicant, we're getting 250. So there's this new workforce out there that is going to be available. And how do we make sure that they see the opportunity for them, right? And we know this industry, everybody thinks, well, it's a construction job or it's a tech job. There's a whole bunch of jobs that are coming as part of this, from sales to administration. It's crazy the amount of like any other major industry.
Yeah. No, it is true, because we need accountants, we need marketing people, we need lawyers, we need everybody. And it's a massive industry. And I have to say, I think one of the nice sources for data centers is Uptime Institute. It's a really great repository of information on the jobs that are open, the jobs that are available, the type of things and skills you might need and attributes to take one of those jobs. And anything we do to amplify that, I think, is super critical. And again, like AI is something that scares people in a lot of regards. It'll make a lot of problems, it'll solve the same problems, right? But AI is not the idea is it's not going to replace jobs as much as the people who don't use it are going to get replaced. So think about it, like law, right, or medicine. AI is phenomenal. It can support billions of data points, and it will, and we will continue to build infrastructure to support that. But the doctors and the lawyers and the people who have these positions and use AI are going to be the ones who thrive. Because again, it's like doing more with less, you know. Our population is still growing, although we have kind of stagnated in the modern world. There's still a growth. I mean, over the last 10 years, we added 1 billion people to the planet. Africa is the fastest growing and youngest nation, or continent rather, on the planet. So there's a lot of focus over there. And they don't have a lot of data centers. They don't have a lot of infrastructure. So they're going to have to figure things out. And, you know, and we're going to be the ones who want to help them figure it out, because we have to reach those billions of people. And they're going to be able to leapfrog ahead in some regards, you know, with low orbit satellites and getting signals in that manner. But then again, we still need a data center to store the data. And so, so there's a lot of focus over on that continent right now. And then also when it comes to infrastructure, extract resources and demand, it's not, again, I say it's not just data centers, it's like hospitals. Who has been to an airport lately that isn't under construction? Anyone? Like I travel all the time. Every single airport is under construction, right? And then, you know, when a natural disaster happens, and we have fires in California, and we have tornadoes down south, every time that occurs, you know, who has to come in and rebuild, right? We rebuild. And we're trying to be more resilient, more responsible about it, but it's still a problem that exists today. So it taps these resources, and it makes it even more challenging by tens of times than if we didn't have these kind of global, you know, impacts in and around the world that creates this kind of demand. Demographics is a huge driver of that, right? Global warming is the driver of that. Geopolitical is the driver of that. A pandemic is the driver of that. Like all of these things make big shifts. And what I try to tell my audiences are, this is the new norm. This is it. Like we're not just gonna be like, okay, maybe next year we'll get back to normal. Like this is it. Like, you know, so figure it out. And again, it's necessary. We have to figure it out, so we will.
You know, you mentioned Africa. I have some consulting clients in Ghana. They're desperate for data centers because they see the impact. I work in India, Canada, maybe Spain, Zaragoza, Spain. I mean, all of these places are really desperate for this, and they want to learn how to do it right. They want to understand, you know, what are those lessons learned, and how do we determine the best way forward to balance everything that comes with this. Because again, when you look at growth and you look at opportunity, you know, I challenge you to find an industry that is better suited for the future. There's a reason why all these big funds are getting it, right? You know, there's a reason why Mr. Wonderful is now in. You know, I mean, because there's opportunity. And try to find that opportunity, yet do it in a way that makes sense for each individual jurisdiction. It is a challenge. It's something we have to face.
It's challenging, and I remember having a conversation with Dean Nelson about this. Gosh, it's probably been 3 years. And it was the whole, hey, if we knew 25 years ago what we know today, which is kind of where Africa and India and a lot of these places are, what would we do differently? You know, it's something you really have to think about, because there's a lot of things we can do differently. You know, we're scrambling right now to make change and to do good stuff and to pivot. But even once we find a few magic bullets, and there won't be one answer, there'll be multiple answers to lots of our problems, including power. Power is going to get figured out. Like Mr. Wonderful figured it out. I mean, but it's geography matters. And it won't be just that one thing. It'll be this and that and everything, right? But once we get to where we figure that out, there's a plethora of legacy projects and locations that are going to need to be dealt with as well. So it's not like you find a solution, it becomes, you know, not cost prohibitive and we can commercialize it, and then the work begins, right?
The work never ends, you know, and that's what evolution is. That's what innovation is. It's finding that new way of doing things that makes everything better. And you know, this industry is doing that. You know, I want to hit a little bit more on power, because power has become the biggest challenge for us in Northern Virginia. Not so much the availability of power, but we did have that blip where we kind of came up short a little bit. But that was about the power infrastructure, you know, and where does that infrastructure go? We don't generate a lot of power in Virginia, so we're importers of power. And you can't import power if you don't have infrastructure, and infrastructure is not very popular. We've gotten put in a position where we have to put power lines where we weren't anticipating them. We've gotten to a point where there are going to be homes that are going to be impacted and have to be condemned. Those are not good problems. And that happens because, we have to import this power. So what is that opportunity? What is that opportunity there to completely change the way you think? I think part of it is you take the power needs to where the generation is. But I think there's also other ways that we're looking at to try to understand how we take that power and do it in a better and a smarter way.
Well, Mr. Wonderful did point out that energy as a service is one of those ways. It's kind of, I would say, almost a low-hanging fruit in our industry where the large mega campuses are going to be givers and not just takers, and it's a whole other business model. And we've been studying that for a couple of years. It's a very viable model. It's just something that, again, some areas are more mature than others, and it takes CapEx to invest in that, and it takes a little risk management in order to, regain on the OpEx side. And the technology you use is not the same. It's different everywhere because geography matters. And so trying to figure out whether you use renewable natural gas in one area or, fuel cells in another area or, geothermal over here. It's going to be all of those things. But once you figure that out, these mega campuses that are 1,000 acres plus are going to be givers, and they're going to be taking the edge off the grids in the peak times. And the challenge is just to get ahead of it at the pace we need to, because the pace of what we're putting in place is, it's exponentially getting faster and faster. And I was going to say this too, today is as slow as we're going to go, right? Just think about that. So keeping up with the pace and being able to meet the demands and then also be givers and not takers is one of the big things that the data center industry is focused on. And that's the step one. That would be just step one. And I also think that the data center industry is, they, like I said, they service all businesses, right? And so they're so diverse and they're so forward thinking and they're so disruptive that I have a lot of hope and a lot of, foresight on the fact that the data center industry is going to it's not just the fifth industrial revolution, it's going to change how we live and how we work and how we interact with each other. And I think and I hope that it makes us better as a human race, right? And I would just bring one other thing up. This is Nancy's opinion, right? This is not, even though I represent Compass. The great equalizers is going after. We don't want the internet to be the great divider. We want it to be the great equalizer. So we want to cover that digital divide and close that gap. And we're all upset over the million different news streams that come in and why we have 18 different theaters and people are sitting and watching these movies and all that stuff. But AI has the propensity to, to level set that, to level it, to literally say okay, your movie, you're it's a 57% chance that it's accurate. Yeah, and suspend reality over here. And then your movie, up here, kind of a 78% chance, right? It has the ability to be able to look at so many data points and try to level the playing field to some degree. So there's hope. I guess that's what I'm saying, there's hope. And I'm one of the people who is embracing it. I'm a little addicted to it, actually. And even though it drives my business and it helps us grow, we were all afraid when the internet came out, and now look at what it's done for us, right? I can sit and watch my child jump horses on a Zoom call. It's fascinating. I'm just this is amazing, right?
You're a good multitasker, I suppose. We should talk a little bit about the environment, though, because we take a lot of heat from the environment. In my community, we have 43 million square feet of data center, approaching 7 gigs. It's crazy. But the air quality is actually better today than it was a decade ago. Now, that's because we're not producing energy, right? We're not. But there is concerns out there, especially, with natural gas, is there a carbon capture that makes sense? How are you guys, who have always been ahead of those kind of things, how are you guys approaching that?
Yeah, so planet, that's going to be the planet. So the one thing we're doing, when I just mentioned like the legacy stuff, all the tier 2 generators you see out there, which, have to do with air quality, we, in just the fuel, the diesel fuel itself, we use HVO to fill all of our tanks because you don't have to change all of your assets to do that, and you can do it. And we're trying to drive the industry to do the same thing. I think Microsoft is now on board, which is great, and others will follow. And as they follow, it'll become more available, and the price will go down because that's how it works, in any kind of economy. So what Crosby's his focus and his goal is to do what you can do, right? Like we aren't working on energy as a service. We're trying to figure out what's the best business model to get us to where we can still eat and live indoors and also service the community and do what's right responsibly. So HVOs is one of the easy things. Some of the other things we do is we really focus on needs and methods. So if we take things in offsite environments, which 70+% of our facilities are done in an offsite environment, we reduce the time of delivery on site. Delivery is somewhere nominally between 12 and 50% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So we're automatically doing that. In our factories where we fabricate things, these opportunities for our big global suppliers to have a solar farm, to have reclaimed water, to do things in a sustainable manner, to have a controlled environment, exist that do not exist on the site. Even when we look at our cast-made concrete, which we can't fabricate off-site, we bring the batch plants to our site. So we don't have ready-mix trucks driving back and forth, tearing up the roads, using diesel fuel, all of that. And we can then fine-tune our mixes, and we can reduce our cement by fine-tuning and not being lazy. So when we have massive amounts of foundations and so forth we're replacing, and cement is 7% of total greenhouse gas emissions, we can reduce that by not only 20+% just by having it on site and having better yield and better designs, right? So there's all these amazing ways. We also look at total cost of ownership. We're really focused on scope 3 and what we call scope 4, which is the avoidance of emissions, right? That's a phrase that Crosby actually coined. Because if we do so many things, we have air wall systems, we have water systems, we have all these things that we do, but we just avoid having the emissions in the first place. I think another good example is roofing products. So there's tons of them out there. If you pay a little more and you get, you could use on these roofing products, and you don't have the onset of the heat island and all this other stuff, and these will last 37 years. If you don't have to rip your roof off and put a new roof on, that is a huge savings. It's less waste, right? And it's better for business. So we look at total cost of ownership, longevity, built to last, and we do use precast structures, right? And precast has an opportunity to also get very innovative when it comes to cement and modern methods of building. Again, we can put up a 250,000 square foot facility in less than 2 months and be dried in, right? And that building doesn't burn, and it's got great thermal properties, and it will stand there for 100 years. So, we can do that whole, like I said, the shipbuilding thing. So, really focusing on longevity, time matters. Scope 3 is hard. Scope 3, by the way, if you guys don't understand ESG terminology, Scope 1 and Scope 2 are consumption. It's consuming fuel and power and water and, all consumption, right? Scope 3 is everything else. And Scope 3 represents 80% of greenhouse gas emissions. But it's hard to measure. So we're trying to take the lead on that. And there's these things called intensity values and absolute values. Absolute values are just total quantity. And as we build, that grows. It just keeps growing. So we focus on the intensity value, on the unit of measurement, whether it's a gallon, or square meter, a cubic yard, whatever it is, we want our intensity value to go down. And every year we track it to see that it's going down. And we're doing better on individual units. It's because we want the industry to follow us. So again, we like to be first to market, we don't like to be last to market, we want to lead the way. And that's what we're focused on when it comes to sustainability.
But it really takes commitment, right? And it takes commitment from the top. And it's not a lifetime achievement award. Every day you've got to be doing it, right? But what is your messaging though? How are you making sure that when you go into a community that people understand you're doing all of this?
Yeah, well, we're still working on that, and we try. We have library cards that kind of show like case studies on a lot of the stuff that we do that are shareable. But the messaging. I was just at the Structures Congress session, the big conference for SEI in Phoenix, and the message I gave the audience, which I thought got a really good reply, is we just do business. We try to do business better. And a byproduct of doing that is sustainable design, sustainable decisions. It's design decisions, better design decisions, better product selection, better needs and methods, better use of technology. Those are the 4 categories that we focus on. And I think it's important to note that we don't believe there's a green tax. We don't. I don't. I mean, even well before I came on board with Compass, I took jobs that were in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and we went from silver to gold lead, and we saved millions of dollars in the process by making better decisions. So I just firmly believe that doing good business, that there's a byproduct of having a more sustainable project. And I think a good analogy, and I was just talking to my senior VP over here, Rachel, who's our head of our safety, and I said, you know, it's kind of like safety used to be in our industry. We're like, oh, we need to spend a bunch of money on safety. You know, I mean, that's a lot of doing. You know, I feel like we haven't done that before, you know. And then we finally figured out, oh my gosh, an organized, safe, you know, really efficient job is better. It makes us more money. It makes people happier. It, you know, there's a million reasons why you should spend a lot of money there. I mean, and actually, money is no object when it comes to safety for us. No, I mean, it's literally like, that's like an easy investment to make. I think sustainability is no different. I really do. It's just trying to figure out that really good business case that ends up having a byproduct of not just a better building, but a more responsibly built building.
I've been recently talking about the abilities of energy, you know, availability, scalability, reliability, affordability, and sustainability. And the perfect sites have all, right? I mean, but, you know, you have to make those choices. You have to be conscious about them. And it's something that you have to really think through early on when you're looking at sites. And all of that is really, really important. Have we hit all the P's?
We have, well, P's was like the other one we kind of touched on because it touches all of them. But but you're right. I mean, the land prospecting, which is another P, is also important because you know, he who has the best land wins, usually in the REIT world, and being able to look at a piece of land and understand the complexity of it, whether it has wetlands, whether it has, you know, any environmental features that you need to be concerned with, whether it's difficult to build, whether it's in, you know, a flood zone. I mean, it's hard. And there's really cool technologies now that are coming out really fast that allow you to look at land and then kind of figure out, you know, if I improve this, then it's kind of whack-a-mole, then, you know, this goes up. And trying to figure out the optimal way to use a piece of land for our purposes. This is a good message for the public perception, because, you know, residential builders don't do this, and also a way to make sure that environmentally we're doing all the right things and we're still optimizing the use of the land. And some really great technologies about biodiversity and all the other things that we care about when we go into a community. I mean, we have a big campus in Leesburg, and we spent a lot of money on a massive underground facility for the storm management, because we're right by Goose Creek, and Goose Creek can't have any sediment put in it. And we are very proud to say that when we test, there is no runoff on our property that goes into Goose Creek. And we want people to know that, and we want people to understand. And, you know, we look at our surrounding community and we say, you know, we're doing workforce development down in Dallas, we're investing a lot in that. We put scholarships together up here in Northern Virginia so we can bring people into the industry. Some of this is grassroots stuff, which I think is important and it works, but I'm kind of into the go big or go home state. I want that spontaneous awareness. I want you all to be messaging me on LinkedIn and telling me how to get better with the spontaneous awareness over the P's that we've been talking about today. Put your thinking caps on and reach back out.
So what you see here, we have these conversations all the time. It's just today we're having it on a stage. But we would like to invite you into the conversation. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead. Yeah, and I think we've improved a lot on that. I mean, you know, today's substations look better. We're doing GIS substations now that we've not done before. We're trying to do better screening, and part of that is the learning process, right? I mean, we were so desperate for investment in 2007, 2008 that, frankly, I apologize to a lot of residents for this. I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was thinking about how do we get these people in here, and that was all I cared about. But now, we are asking for better design, and I think it shows. But you're right. I mean, substations are not as controllable for us as buildings are. Like, we can ask for design on buildings and things. But, we're a regulated utility. Dominion's a regulated utility. So there's only so much that they're allowed to do without, the SCC giving them direction. But in Loudoun, in my office in Ashburn, there's 15 substations within 1.5 miles that are either in operation or being built. And the only way we can do that is to try to take it one at a time to try to do a better job.
Well, and just so going forward, you can tell you said you're from Oregon? Yeah. You can tell your right. Like, we build substations, so there's a couple things about that. We have coffers that say, there's only so much I want to see from the road. So you're never going to see a substation of ours from the road, ever. And we're only going to have certain height restrictions, and we're going to put parks and walkways and everything. It's going to be beautiful. And the other thing is, putting substations out the campus is very critical for sustainability. There's so much power loss through the air, so the transmission matters. So the closer you get to the campus, the more sustainable you are, and the better you can garnish that power. So it's another thing that I think is just education, understanding that. And so on the large campuses, when we think data centers, we have to be in the utility business as well, and we build these things, and we do it with the most sustainable methods that we can possibly do it, for longevity and for all the right reasons. And we put them on our campus so that we can have that, we don't lose that transmission.
We try to use the buildings as shields from the roads when we can, and put the substations inside or back of the campuses. But I mean, if you drive down Loudoun County Parkway, you see probably 7 substations, and they're not great looking, and they're tall, and the connection.
Yeah, but when it's CIA, nobody complains.
Well, that's true.
They're not talking.
Yeah, but right now the data centers complain for whether they do it or not. So that's part of it. We have about 3 minutes. Anybody else have a question for us?
Who's responsible for the messaging of the image of data centers? Yeah, I mean, we're all responsible for it. I mean, everyone's spending a good amount of PR money trying to, figure out how to message us a little better, and like in all the different theaters, we're trying to come up with like one advertisement that shows up in every theater that sends a different message. I don't know how, but that's what we're trying to do. I'm going to put a plug in for iMasons too, because even though you have a lot of different conferences, you got DCD, ACDC, 7.24, the Data Center World, Data Center Global Congress, we got all these things we go to, and they're huge, they're big conferences, but it's still small in the big grand scheme of things. And iMasons is everywhere. They're everywhere, and they have the decision makers on their advisory board. So I feel like, I think there's a lot of influence to be had there. And I feel like if you're going to try to stitch things together, an organization like that can be helpful from a messaging standpoint. And we do have like the Plankton Accord, which, lots and lots of businesses have signed up to. And, so there's a lot of good work happening there through the iMasons organization. And I'm sure there's others as well.
Yeah, but I'll tell you that I don't think we're doing enough. Who's responsible? We should all be responsible, but I feel like sometimes I'm a lone voice in Virginia because there's not that many people that are out there, But I think it is important that we understand that it's an evolutionary process, right? That Yeah, and, you know, the lowest common denominator is always gonna be your problem, right? We can have 10 companies that are doing beautiful design, and we probably have more than that. But then you have one company that's like, I'm still just doing the same old thing. You know, that's the one that we will constantly hear about. We'll hear about the good things. So, you know, I do think that, you know, trying to judge this industry, and as we know it today, I know it's been around a long time, but as we know it today, it's probably 20 years old, right? I mean, as we know it today. You know, you wouldn't want to judge the car industry after 20 years. You wouldn't want to judge, you know, a lot of industries after 20 years. We're better at doing it today than we were, you know, 10 years ago, better than we were 15 years ago. But, you know, hopefully we'll continue to get better and we'll find better ways to make sure we're messaging that.
And we are looking at that, like if we knew now, what we back then, what would be different? We need to be thinking that way, and I think the hyperscalers are, and all of our competitors are. So, well, I know we're going to run over a little bit. By the way, everybody go on social media and say how fantastic this fireside chat was, and that they should have put us in a different slot. I just want to say that. Okay, go. Okay, I have it. That's an easy one for me. What I'm most proud of is the respect we have for our trades. I'm most proud of the fact that if you're going to do any job and you see Compass, the trades want to come to our site. And here's why. Because we can do what we do at the pace we do it in an 8-hour day. And these tradespeople can get home and be with their families. And we have a lot of humility and vulnerability in our CG program. We have a program called Frontliners that I'm extremely proud of. And we're learning so much about the entire industry, including mental health, including, you know, how to be better, how to be more efficient, you know, and how to care for these tradespeople who I wish we treated like professional athletes because we desperately need them. That's what I'm most proud of.
And for me, I think what I'm most proud of when we have allowed it is that we were the first to recognize data centers as an economic development opportunity. We proactively went out to attract data centers as something that could impact the economy. Nobody else was doing it at that time. You know, and I tell the story all the time. The state of Virginia was against the data center sales tax incentive because in their mind it didn't have enough jobs with it. And I was like, but, you know, eventually we got it through, but I mean, no one was thinking that way. You know, now I think economic developers across the world understand this is an opportunity for communities to get better and to serve their communities better.
That word needs to get spread more because there are still a lot of people who don't get it. They're like, what's a big empty building? How's that helping us? They just don't get it, so that has to continue as state course.
This was such a great opportunity for me. I've been wanting to do this with Nancy. Thank you guys for coming.